We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're asking whether the media bell tolls for Joe Biden. Also, we're going to take a look at the election numbers for 2024 and examine two hugely important free speech cases in the Supreme Court. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. It's going to be quite the show. Let's get started. Ask not for whom the media bell tolls, Mr. Biden. It chimes for thee, and those are not the chimes of oranges and lemons ringing out your endorsement. Here we are back on Liberty Nation Radio with our special guest, longtime host of this here radio show and senior political analyst at LibertyNation.com, Mr. Tim Donner, to discuss the breaking of the ranks of the Fourth Estate. Tim, great to have you here.
Okay, always fun, Mark. Appreciate it.
Tim, you wrote a stupendous article of Wednesday this last week discussing the Fourth Estate, almost breaking ranks. And a word you used in the opening there was, it was almost as if the permission seal had been broken, permission concept seal had been broken. And I thought that was really fascinating because it does seem that despite the last, well, since Joe Biden raised his head for the primary, really, he has been treated with kid gloves. And now it looks like there's actually some honest reporting on him from we shan't name them, but the usual suspects. Tim?
Well, I think the relevant single soundbite regarding the media in the 2020 campaign was when Joe Biden came out of one of the rare events that he went and appeared in public afterwards. And they asked him about what flavor ice cream he was indulging in the cone that he had in his hand. That typified the media's coverage of Biden in 2020. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, focus on Trump. And Biden just became the not Trump. And all of his weaknesses, including the ones we're seeing so starkly now, mostly because of his neurological condition. I mean, those were all ignored. Look, Biden's got a 4-year record, and if they were to try and pretend that Biden is popular, that his policies are popular, that people think he can handle another 4 years up to the age of 86, I think they realized that even for them was a bridge too far. So we see stories like the NBC News, which really sort of typified where the media is going. The New York Times were willing to come down hard on the Biden campaign in terms of where it stands, the peril it faces. It's trailing in right now every single battleground state, all 7 of them.
We'll talk about those numbers later on in the show, Tim. Don't give the game away.
You know, Mark, once the big kahunas in Washington and New York, shall we say, the Pied Pipers of left-wing media, of establishment, mainstream, legacy, elite media, however you want to term them, they realize that they can't pretend that everything's all fine with Joe Biden without passing. They wouldn't pass the laugh test. I think they realized they had to at least admit that this guy was unpopular, way behind in the polls, behind in every battleground state. So I think they feel like they have no choice but to acknowledge that the Biden campaign is in deep trouble.
I wonder how much of this is self-serving and whether they're willing to serve their own ends, to essentially sacrifice Joe Biden to serve their own ends. Because two points that I'd like to come back on here. So firstly, you've got this idea that in 2020, yes, he didn't have a presidential record. And so let's be clear what it was. It was fawning. It was sycophantic fawning over Joe Biden as this savior against Donald Trump. It was kind of sickening to watch, but it was almost excusable because we already knew their feelings about Donald Trump. And so perhaps ignoring the underlying issues of a Joe Biden presidency, it's almost as though you can see why they might have just sort of skated over it and not paid as much attention as they wanted to. But now it's all out in the open. We've got an almost 4-year record for him to look at, as you pointed out. And you have this situation where if they do it now, then any credibility that they have left, which, let's be very, very clear, is already at an historic low. It's just,
Yes.
Nobody trusts the media anymore because, well, why would they? Let's be fair. So now it's almost like a last stand for them to say, well, okay, before we didn't know what kind of a president he was going to be, but now we know, and therefore we can
now we know what most Trump supporters believed Biden would be as president.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people thought that he would be at least a mediocrity who could just kind of lower the temperature, kind of normalize things in terms of sending it back to what people were used to. But I'll never understand how a guy who, if he had just restored normalcy, as he promised to do, and had really attempted to unify, which he said he was going to do, he went in the opposite direction, and that's what's got him in trouble now.
Well, let's dig into that a bit, because perhaps part of it, when he was elected in part, and there's no denying it, he was elected in part because he said he was going to be a transition candidate. Nobody expected an 82-year-old or 81, 82-year-old to be on the campaign trail. He said he was a transition candidate time and time again. And the media took that rightly, as did much of the country, to believe that so he's going to serve one term and then his vice president is going to step in, right? So that's what the media was promised. Now, without talking too much about Kamala Harris at the moment,
implicitly, if not explicitly, yes.
So maybe they feel a little bit betrayed because although much of the country, especially according to the polls, she's basically the most unpopular high-level politician in the country, who's still in office and staying in office.
Other than Mitch McConnell.
Well, he's leaving.
But he's leaving.
He's leaving.
He's leaving a leadership position. Yeah.
And so, but the media still love Kamala Harris despite everything. So maybe they feel a little bit betrayed.
Well, I don't think I
shed no tears for them for that betrayal, but
I remember the discussions that we had here in 2021 and 22 when we were talking about whether it was possible for Biden to actually even make it to the end of one term. That the idea was he would be a caretaker president, and then I still can't to this day believe that they thought that Kamala Harris would be a popular successor to him. I mean, I think they did that strictly for political purposes, taking a Black woman. But now look, I've said it so many times, if Joe Biden had, after the midterms, had stepped aside and said, I've done my job, I took down Trump and we did well in the midterms. Now I'll pass it to a new generation. He would have been a hero in the Democratic Party. Now he's going to be a millstone around their neck.
Yeah, or an albatross, perhaps. Don't go anywhere, listeners. We're going to be right back with Tim Donner after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.